I fired her, then discovered she was the love I lost years ago.
I fired her, then discovered she was the love I lost. Years ago, her resignation letter trembled in my hand, ink still wet, and as our eyes met across my mahogany desk, something ancient stirred in my chest. A ghost I thought I'd buried 15 years ago. The corner office on the 42nd floor had everything I'd ever wanted. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Seattle skyline like a painting I owned. My name, Marcus Chen, CEO, gleamed on the glass door in letters that caught the morning light just right. At 37, I'd built Chen Technologies from a cramped garage into a billion-dollar empire. I had power, respect, everything except the one thing I'd stopped letting myself want. I didn't do sentiment, couldn't afford to. My assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "Mr. Chen, the quarterly reports are ready. Ms. Parker from marketing is here with the presentations. Send her in." I didn't look up from my laptop when the door opened. I was reviewing acquisition targets, my mind already 3 moves ahead in the chess game of corporate expansion. Footsteps approached, hesitant, lighter than I expected. "Mr. Chen." Her voice was soft, professional, with a slight tremor that suggested nerves. "I have the campaign analytics you requested." "Put them on the desk." I gestured without looking, my eyes still scanning financial projections. Numbers were clean, predictable. They never disappointed you or walked away without explanation. Papers rustled. A faint scent reached me. Jasmine, or was it gardenia? Something floral and achingly familiar that made my fingers pause on the keyboard. I pushed the feeling away. I was good at that. The conversion rates improved by 18% after we implemented the new strategy, she continued, her voice gaining confidence. But I think we're missing an opportunity in the demographic data. The 25-34 age group is responding differently than projected, and if we could, that's not your job. I cut her off, finally glancing up. Your job is to present data, not interpret it. We have analysts for... The words died in my throat. She stood 3 feet away, a woman in a gray blazer and white blouse, her dark hair pulled back in a neat bun. Professional, unremarkable, except for the eyes. Those eyes, warm brown with flecks of gold that caught the light like amber. Eyes I'd once memorized in the darkness of a college dorm room. Eyes that had looked at me like I was someone worth becoming. My heart slammed against my ribs. "Elena?" The name escaped before I could stop it, raw and disbelieving. But even as I said it, I knew I was wrong. This woman was older, her face thinner, with fine lines around her eyes that spoke of years I hadn't witnessed. Her nameplate read Sarah Parker, not Elena Vasquez, not the girl who'd vanished from my life 15 years ago without a word, taking my heart and all my stupid young dreams with her. She blinked, confusion crossing her features. "I'm sorry." "Nothing." I forced my expression back to neutral, angry at myself for the slip. "Continue." But I couldn't focus on her words. My mind was spiraling backward, dragged by the undertow of memory. Elena. My Elena. We'd met sophomore year at University of Washington. She was an art major with paint perpetually under her nails. I was drowning in computer science coursework and surviving on ramen and ambition. She'd crashed into my life like a burst of color in a grayscale world, teaching me that there was more to living than the next exam, the next project, the next achievement. We'd spent 3 years inseparable. She'd sketched while I coded, our futures tangled together in late-night conversations about the life we'd build. I'd promised her everything, a future where her art mattered, where my success would be our success. Then, in our senior year, she was just gone. Her dorm room emptied overnight, her phone disconnected. Her friends claimed they didn't know where she'd gone, but their eyes wouldn't meet mine. I'd searched for weeks, desperate and unraveling, before pride and pain forced me to stop. She'd chosen to disappear. Chosen to leave without even a goodbye. That abandonment had carved something out of me, hollowed me into someone harder, someone who didn't get distracted by sentiment. Mr. Chen, Sarah Parker, not Elena, I reminded myself fiercely, was staring at me with concern. Are you all right? Fine. I straightened, reassembling my armor. Your analysis is surface level, and your presentation lacks rigor. The marketing department has been underperforming for 3 quarters. I'm restructuring the division. Her face paled. Sir, Your position is being eliminated. HR will contact you with the details. You have 2 weeks. What would you do if you came face to face with someone who reminded you of your greatest loss? Drop your thoughts below. I read every comment. She didn't argue, didn't plead. Just gathered her papers with shaking hands and walked toward the door, shoulders squared with dignity I didn't want to admire. But at the threshold, she paused. You know what's funny? Her voice was quiet, barely audible over the hum of the city below. I used to know someone like you, someone brilliant and driven, who saw the world as something to conquer. But he also saw people, really saw them. I wonder what happened to him. The door clicked shut behind her. I sat frozen, her words detonating in my chest. The resemblance was uncanny, the cadence of her speech, the way she tilted her head, even the sad curve of her smile. But it couldn't be. Elena wouldn't be here, working in my company under a different name. It was impossible. Wasn't it? I pulled up her employee file on my computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. Sarah Marie Parker. Age 36. Hired 8 months ago. Previous employment, various contract positions, freelance work. Education, BA in Business Administration from Seattle Central College, not the University of Washington. Not an art degree. Nothing matched. But the birth date, my breath caught. May 17th, Elena's birthday. I enlarged her employee photo. The corporate headshot showed a composed woman with a professional smile that didn't reach her eyes. I zoomed in on those eyes, searching for what? Proof. Absolution. An explanation for why my chest felt like it was caving in. My hand moved without permission, opening the locked drawer in my desk. Inside, beneath a stack of contracts I'd never needed, was a single photograph. Creased and faded, it showed 2 college kids laughing on a beach. Her in my oversized hoodie, me with hair too long and dreams too big. Her head was tilted against my shoulder, and we looked at the camera like we'd just invented happiness. I held the photo next to the computer screen. Different. Everything was different. And yet, my intercom buzzed. Mr. Chen, your 10 a.m. is here. I shoved the photo back in the drawer and slammed it shut. This was ridiculous. I was seeing ghosts because of a coincidental resemblance, letting the past infect the present like some lovesick teenager. I'd built an empire by being ruthless and logical, by not looking back. But that night, I couldn't sleep. I stood in my penthouse apartment, whiskey untouched in my hand, staring at the city lights blurring through the rain-streaked windows. Somewhere out there, Sarah Parker was probably updating her resume, telling someone about her terrible boss. And somewhere in the gaps between what I'd seen and what I'd convinced myself was real, the truth waited like a trap. At 2 a.m., I did something I hadn't done in 15 years. I opened my laptop and typed a name into the search bar. Elena Vasquez, Seattle. The results were sparse. A few social media profiles that led nowhere. An obituary for an Elena Vasquez in Spokane. Wrong age. A wedding announcement from Texas. Different person. It was like she'd been erased from existence, unless she'd erased herself. I typed in Sarah Parker instead, adding filters. Her digital footprint was equally minimal, a LinkedIn profile with bare details, no social media presence, no photographs beyond the professional headshot. For someone in marketing, she maintained a ghost's online invisibility. My phone buzzed, an email from HR, copying me on Sarah Parker's termination paperwork, standard procedure. I should have deleted it and gone to bed. Instead, I opened the attachment. Emergency contact, none listed. Next of kin, none listed. Previous address history showed a pattern of moving every year or two, never staying anywhere long, like someone running or hiding. The whiskey burned as I finally drank it. What was I doing? Even if, by some impossible chance, Sarah Parker was Elena, so what? She'd left me. She'd chosen to vanish. And now I'd fired her, which felt like justice or cruelty or maybe both. But if she was Elena, why was she here? Why now? I saw her again 3 days later in the building lobby. I was returning from a lunch meeting, still in my armor of a Tom Ford suit and cold efficiency, when I spotted her near the elevator banks. She was speaking with security, her voice too low to hear, but her body language radiated distress. "I'm telling you, I left my laptop in my desk drawer," she was saying as I approached. "I just need 5 minutes to retrieve it. All my personal files are on there." The security guard shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am. Protocol says terminated employees need HR escort to retrieve personal items. You'll have to come back during business hours and schedule. I have a job interview in 2 hours. I need those files now." Something in her voice, the edge of desperation beneath the composed surface, made me stop. She hadn't noticed me yet, too focused on the guard. "Let her up." Both turned. Sarah's eyes widened when she saw me, and for a fleeting second I could have sworn I saw something flash across her face. Recognition? Fear? It vanished too quickly to name. "Mr. Chen, the protocol," the guard started. "I'll escort her myself." The words came out before I'd decided to say them. Some subconscious part of me was driving now, the part that remembered how to be human. 5 minutes. We rode the elevator in silence. The digital numbers climbed, 15, 20, 25. Each floor another layer of tension. She stood as far from me as the space allowed, her reflection in the polished doors, showing a woman wound tight, barely holding together. "You didn't have to do this," she finally said. "I know you. I know I disappointed you. My work wasn't good enough. Your work was fine." The admission escaped before I could stop it. "The restructuring had nothing to do with your performance." "Then why?" The elevator dinged, 42nd floor. I stepped out without answering because I didn't have an answer that made sense. "Because you reminded me of someone who broke me. Because I'm terrified you might actually be her." The office was mostly empty, just a few late workers hunched over keyboards. I led her to her cubicle, a small, neat space with a dying succulent on the desk and a coffee mug that read, "Nevertheless," she persisted. No personal photos, no decoration beyond the plant. Another red flag of someone living like a ghost. She grabbed her laptop from the drawer, but her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. I caught it reflexively, my fingers brushing hers. The contact was electric. She jerked back like I'd burned her, and something fell from her bag, a small sketchbook, landing open on the floor between us. I bent to pick it up automatically. And that's when I saw it. The page showed a charcoal drawing of the Seattle waterfront at sunset, the skyline rendered in soft, expressive strokes that captured not just the shapes, but the feeling of the city. In the corner, almost hidden, were initials, EV. My heart stopped. "You drew this?" It wasn't a question. I knew that style like I knew my own heartbeat, loose and emotional, more interested in capturing essence than precision. Elena's style. She snatched the sketchbook from my hands, clutching it to her chest. It's nothing. Just a hobby. Elena Vasquez. I said it clearly this time, watching her face. That's who you are. That's who you were. The color drained from her face. For a long moment, she just stared at me. And I watched 15 years of denial and pain and questions crystallize into certainty in the space between us. How did you? Her voice broke. Marcus. Hearing my name in her voice, the one I'd convinced myself I'd forgotten, hit me like a physical blow. All the anger I'd stored, all the hurt I'd transformed into ambition and ice, came flooding back. You knew, I said, the accusation harsh. You knew who I was. You applied to work here, in my company, and you didn't say anything. Why? I needed a job. Bullshit. Seattle has thousands of companies. Why mine? She turned away, gripping the edge of the cubicle. I didn't think you'd remember me. It's been 15 years. People change. I changed everything about myself. My name, my degree, my... Why? The question ripped out of me. Why did you leave? Why did you disappear without a word? Do you have any idea what that did to me? Yes. She turned back, and there were tears streaming down her face now, years of them. Yes, Marcus, I know exactly what it did, because it did the same thing to me. Have you ever had to face someone from your past who you never got closure with? What would you say to them? Let me know in the comments. We ended up in my office because she was crying too hard to leave, and I couldn't let her walk through the building like that, even as fury and confusion warred in my chest. I closed the door and blinds, sealing us in with ghosts and truth. She sat in the chair across from my desk, the same chair where, 3 days ago, I'd fired her without knowing I was destroying the last thread connecting me to who I used to be. Talk, I said. It came out harder than I meant, but I was hanging on to control by a thread. Explain. She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara, and for a moment she looked exactly like the girl I'd loved. Vulnerable and brave and breaking. My father found out about us, about you. What does your father have to do with anything? Everything. Her laugh was bitter. You remember I never talked about my family. There was a reason. My father was Rafael Vasquez. You might know him by his other name, Rafael El Martillo Vasquez. The name meant nothing for a second, then clicked into place from old news reports. The crime boss, the one they finally convicted 5 years ago. She nodded. I spent my whole childhood trying to be invisible, trying to be good enough that he'd leave me alone. When I got into college, I thought I'd escaped. I thought I could just be normal. Be Elena, the art student, not Elena, the daughter of a monster. Then I met you, and for 3 years I got to pretend I was just a girl in love. Elena, senior year he found out about you. I don't know how. One of his people must have been watching. He called me home for dinner. She said the word like it was poisoned. He told me I had 2 choices, disappear and never contact you again, or he'd make sure you disappeared. Permanently. The room tilted. What? He showed me photos, Marcus. Photos of you leaving class, getting coffee, sleeping in your apartment. He had people following you for weeks. He said you were a problem, that you made me weak, made me care about something other than family. He said if I didn't end it cleanly, he'd have you killed and make it look like an accident. And I believed him because I'd seen him do it before. I couldn't breathe. So you just left. I didn't have a choice. Her voice rose, raw with pain. I loved you. God, I loved you so much it felt like dying every single day. But I loved you enough to keep you alive. So I emptied my dorm room in the middle of the night. I got on a bus with 1 bag and a fake ID my father's people provided. I became Sarah Parker, boring, invisible Sarah who moved every year and never let anyone get close because if I did, if my father ever found out I'd built another life, he'd take it away too. He's in prison now. Has been for 5 years. I know. She looked at me with eyes full of ghosts. But his people aren't. And some habits are hard to break. Staying hidden kept me safe. Kept you safe, even though you never knew you needed protecting. I stood, paced to the window trying to process this. 15 years. 15 years of thinking she'd abandoned me, of turning that pain into fuel for ambition, of becoming someone who didn't need anyone. And all along she'd been out there, alone and scared, and protecting me from shadows I'd never seen. Why come here? I turned back to her. Why risk working for me? Because I'm tired of being invisible. Her voice was barely a whisper. I saw your company in the news, saw your face, successful and powerful and everything you said you'd become. I thought. I don't know what I thought. Maybe that I could be near you even if you didn't know it was me. Maybe I was just lonely enough to be stupid. I convinced myself you wouldn't recognize me. I'd changed my hair, my name, even the way I dressed. But then, you said my name that first day, and I knew I'd made a mistake. Why didn't you tell me then? What was I supposed to say? Hi, I'm the girl who vanished 15 years ago because my crime boss father threatened to kill you. Would you have believed me? Would you have wanted to know? She stood, facing me across the desk. You fired me 3 days ago without a second thought, Marcus. The man I knew would never have done that. You've become exactly what you wanted to be. Untouchable. Maybe I was mourning someone who doesn't exist anymore. The words hit like a blade between my ribs because they were true. I had become untouchable. I'd worn my success like armor, pushing everyone away, telling myself I was better off alone, safer, stronger. I looked for you, I said quietly. For months, I looked everywhere. Then I stopped because it hurt too much to keep hoping. I told myself you weren't worth it, that if you could leave so easily, you never really loved me. I never stopped loving you, her voice broke. I just loved you enough to let you go. We stared at each other across the divide of 15 years and 1,000 unsaid things. The city hummed below us, indifferent to the ruins of a love story that never got its ending. I'm sorry. The words felt inadequate. For firing you, for thinking the worst, for not being someone you could tell the truth to. I'm sorry for leaving, for letting you think I didn't care, for being too scared to come back, even when it was safe. The apologies hung in the air, not quite enough, but maybe a start. Have dinner with me. The words surprised us both. Elena, I couldn't think of her as Sarah anymore, looked at me like I'd spoken a foreign language. What? Dinner? Tonight? Not as your former boss, not as whatever this complicated mess is, just as Marcus and Elena, or Marcus and Sarah, whoever we are now. I moved around the desk, closing the distance between us. 15 years ago, someone took our choice away, but we have a choice now. Marcus, I don't know if... I'm not asking for promises or explanations or anything except dinner. One meal. Let's see if there's anything left worth finding. She studied my face, searching for something. You fired me 3 days ago. Worst mistake I've made in 15 years. I'll hire you back tomorrow if you want. Promote you, give you your own department, or help you find something better somewhere else. Whatever you need. I took a breath, forcing myself to be vulnerable in a way I hadn't allowed since she left. But tonight, I just want to have dinner with the woman I never stopped thinking about. A tear slipped down her cheek, but this time she was smiling. That Thai place on Pike Street, is it still there? The one where you always ordered pad see ew extra spicy and I'd have to steal your water? That's the one. It's still there. I may have walked past it a few hundred times over the years. We met at 7. She'd changed out of her business clothes into a simple blue dress that reminded me of the ones she used to paint in. I ditched my suit jacket and tie, feeling 16 and terrified and more alive than I had in years. The restaurant was exactly as we'd left it, cramped and aromatic, with mismatched chairs and a menu that hadn't changed since 2010. We sat at a corner table, and for the first few minutes, we just looked at each other, relearning faces we'd memorized long ago. "Tell me about the last 15 years," I said. "Everything." So she did. She told me about the bus ride to Portland, living in a studio apartment barely bigger than a closet. She'd gotten a job waitressing, then bartending, too scared to do anything with her art because it was too visible, too much her. She'd moved to different cities every year or two, Portland, Eugene, Tacoma, always circling back towards Seattle like a moth drawn to flame. She'd gone back to school online, got a business degree because it was practical and invisible, and everything art wasn't. "I kept drawing, though," she admitted, her pad CU growing cold between us. "In sketchbooks, I never showed anyone. I couldn't stop. It was the only thing that felt real." "Do you still have them, the sketchbooks?" She nodded. "Boxes of them. 15 years of drawings that no one's ever seen. I want to see them, if you'll show me." She smiled, tentative but real. "Your turn. Tell me about building an empire." I told her about the early years, grinding 18-hour days, building Chen technologies from nothing. I told her about the successes that felt hollow because I had no one to share them with. About becoming someone I wasn't sure I liked, efficient, distant, measuring everything in profit margins and market share. "You were always driven," she said. "That was one of the things I loved. You saw the world as full of possibility. You taught me it wasn't just about winning, that there was beauty in the journey, not just the destination." I forgot that. I reached across the table, my hand hovering near hers. "After you left, I thought the only thing that mattered was succeeding, proving I didn't need anyone." "Did it work?" "No." I let my hand rest next to hers, not quite touching. "I just became lonely and successful instead of lonely and broke." She laughed, a real laugh that sounded like music I'd forgotten. "We're quite a pair." We were. Maybe we could be again. Her finger traced the edge of my hand, a ghost of a touch. "I'm scared, Marcus. I've spent 15 years building walls. I don't know how to take them down. I've spent 15 years doing the same thing. Maybe we can figure it out together." Slowly. No pressure. We talked until the restaurant closed, the staff cleaning around us until the owner, the same one from 15 years ago, kicked us out with a knowing smile. We walked through the Seattle night, the rain that had threatened all evening finally starting to fall. "I have a confession," Elena said as we stood under the awning of my building. "I've walked past this building so many times. I'd look up at the top floors and wonder which office was yours. Wonder if you ever thought about me." "Every day." The admission was easier than I expected. In the quiet moments between meetings, when I let my guard down, I'd wonder where you were, if you were happy, if you ever regretted leaving. Never regretted leaving, only regretted that I had to. The rain intensified, drumming on the awning above us. I wanted to kiss her, wanted to pull her close and pretend 15 years hadn't happened, that we were still those kids who thought love was simple and the world was kind. But we weren't those kids anymore. We were two damaged people who'd survived in different ways, standing in the rain with a history too complicated to ignore and a future too uncertain to predict. "Come to the office tomorrow," I said instead. "Not to work, just to talk. We'll figure out the employment situation, but more importantly, we'll figure out this, us, if there still is an us." "I'd like that." She stood on tiptoe and kissed my cheek, soft and brief and full of promise. "Good night, Marcus." Good night, Elena. I watched her walk into the rain, her figure growing smaller but not disappearing this time. She turned at the corner, gave me a small wave, and smiled. 3 months later, I stood in an art gallery in Pioneer Square, surrounded by charcoal drawings and watercolors that took my breath away. The invitation had read, 15 Years, a collection by Elena Vasquez. She'd insisted on using her real name. I'm done hiding, she'd told me. If anyone comes looking, let them come. I'm tired of being invisible. The drawings told a story of loneliness and survival, of a love remembered in stolen moments, of a city viewed from a distance, never quite belonging. But the newer pieces, the ones from the last few months, were different. They had light in them, hope. My favorite hung in the center, a charcoal drawing of two figures on a beach, young and laughing, entitled What We Were. Next to it was a watercolor of the same two figures, older now, standing in the rain under an awning, the colors running together but somehow more beautiful for it. It was titled What We're Becoming. Elena stood next to me, her hand in mine, a simple gesture that had taken weeks to feel natural again. We were learning each other slowly, carefully, two people who'd been broken by circumstance trying to figure out if the pieces still fit. "What do you think?" she asked nervously. This was her first show, her first time letting the world see the art she'd hidden for 15 years. I pulled her close, kissing her temple. "I think you're extraordinary. I think I'm the luckiest man alive that you walked back into my life." I got fired first. That's hardly romantic. Best business decision I ever made. She laughed and leaned into me, and we stood there surrounded by the ghosts of who we'd been and the promise of who we might become. It wasn't simple. Her father was still in prison, but his shadow remained. And some nights she woke up terrified that loving me would put me in danger again. Some days I slipped back into the cold, distant person I'd become, and she had to remind me to feel instead of calculate. But we were trying, and maybe that was enough. "Marcus," she looked up at me, her eyes bright. "Thank you for giving us another chance. Thank you for coming back, even though I was too blind to see you at first. We have time now. That's what matters. Time. Something we'd lost and found again. Something we wouldn't waste this time around." The gallery filled with people as the evening wore on, collectors and critics admiring her work. I watched her come alive in a way I hadn't seen since college, confident and radiant and fully herself. No more hiding, no more being invisible. Later that night, back in my apartment, now our apartment. Since she'd moved in last month, we stood by the windows overlooking the city. The same view I'd stared at for years, but it looked different now. Warmer, like somewhere worth coming home to. "I never stopped loving you," she said quietly. "Even when I convinced myself I had to. Even when I was Sarah Parker, pretending to be someone else. You were always there. You were always here, too." I touched my chest. "In every decision I made, every wall I built, every time I told myself I was better off alone. You were the reason and the excuse. No more excuses. No more running." She smiled and kissed me, and it felt like coming home after a very long journey. The 15 years between our first kiss and this one had left scars, but scars meant you'd survived something. Scars meant you were still here, still fighting, still capable of healing. We'd lost time, but we'd found each other again. And maybe that was the real story, not the perfect love that got interrupted, but the imperfect love that refused to stay buried, the kind that survived crime bosses and fear and hurt and pride, the kind that could look at 15 years of absence and say, "Okay, now what?" Outside, Seattle glowed in the darkness, full of stories and second chances and people finding their way back to each other. We were just one more story in a city full of them. But it was our story, and this time we were writing it together. Have you ever gotten a second chance at something you thought was lost forever? How did it change you? Share your story below. Your words might inspire someone who needs to hear them today.